Uh, so respiratory system, what is the function of this system? Why do you think that the system is present in our body? What is the main function of respiratory system? Mm-hmm.
Gaseous exchange.
Gaseous exchange. Okay. Okay. Breathing. Nura says breathing. Rawan says taking oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. Absolutely. Do you think any other? You're absolutely right. We need to supply oxygen. Uh, Rawan, we are not supposed to enter through the 8 a.m. link. We are almost about to finish the chapter, finish the semester. You are, whether we have a class at 9 or at 8 a.m., you're always supposed to use your own link, the link for your 9 a.m. Okay, Ravan, send me an email about that. Okay, next time take care of it. Okay, so you're absolutely right. This system is very, very important in terms of supplying oxygen to the entire body, right? And supplying that oxygen to the body is very important because we know that the food which we eat, right? So as a result of breathing, oxygen goes into our body, and that oxygen is required for the cellular respiration. The upcoming topics in the biochemistry are how the food is oxidized, okay, using oxygen, right, to produce the ATP, right? So that means this system is so very important because we will not be able to oxidize our food unless and until oxygen is around, right? So it supplies oxygen to the entire body, okay? And other than that, the carbon dioxide, which is produced as a waste product, okay, so that carbon dioxide is removed. For example, if we have a, for example, if this is a blood vessel, okay, so these are cells. So when cells give off carbon dioxide, okay, from the interstitial spaces, this carbon dioxide enters into the blood vessels, right? From the blood vessels, this from this carbon dioxide is taken near the lungs. In the lungs we have alveoli, okay, so this carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the lungs, okay. So removing harmful carbon dioxide, right, from the body, okay, is once again, it's one more function of the respiratory system. And what you did not mention was maintaining the pH of the blood. Respiratory system plays a very, very important role in maintaining the pH of the blood. In this chapter, we're going to talk about how having some amount of carbon dioxide in the blood is responsible for the pH maintenance, right? So that we will learn in this chapter how changing amount of, if carbon dioxide levels change in the blood, right, it will have a drastic effect on the pH of the blood. So regulation of blood pH is one more function of the respiratory system. Okay. So supplying body with the oxygen, removing the carbon dioxide, maintaining the pH, and one more function which you might think that, oh my God, oh really? Is this the function done by our respiratory system? That is the sound production. Yes, the sound comes out of the sound box, okay, in our larynx. Okay, the sound comes because when we inhale or expire air out, so air which moves on our vocal cords, okay, in our larynx we have membranes called as vocal cords, right? And when we, with the air which we breathe in, okay, that move on the vocal cords, and as the vocal cords vibrate, we are able to produce a sound. Isn't it an important function as well? If there would have been no oxygen or no inhalation, sound production would never have been there. Singing, talking, okay? So that would have been never there. So this is one more function of the respiratory system. In this chapter, we always start with the anatomy. We'll be talking about the anatomy of these organs, right? Nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, lungs, alveoli, pleural membranes, and what is a respiratory membrane, okay? And then we'll move on to the physiology of respiration. Okay, we'll talk about inspiration, expiration, lung volumes, respiratory sounds, okay, external respiration, internal respiration. So, and then control of respiration. And we're going to stop over here. So, the homeostatic imbalances we'll not be discussing. So, we'll stop over here. So, that would be, the kind of the topics which we'll be discussing in this chapter. Now we know that respiratory system is definitely or intimately related or connected to the cardiovascular system, both in location as well as function. If you look at the drawing, see we have heart somewhere here, okay, in the mediastinum, right? So heart and lungs, location wise, they're close to each other. Heart is in the mediastinum and the lungs are surrounding it, right? So location wise they are together, but that's not the only thing. In terms of function, they're also interdependent on each other. If the if the heart has to pump the blood to the entire body, right, that blood needs to be oxygenated. And if you remember, we spoke about pulmonary circuit, pulmonary circulation, where the right ventricle sends the blood, right, to the through the pulmonary trunk to the lungs, and lungs, the oxygen is picked up in the lungs, and then blood is brought back to the heart via the four pulmonary veins. So functionally, they're also, interdependent on each other. Okay, so that was about it. Other than that, now we need to know which organs are called as the upper respiratory organs or the lower respiratory organs. Okay, so you should be able to categorize what are the upper respiratory organs and the lower respiratory organs. Okay, so when you talk about nasal cavity, from nose, then the air passes on to the pharynx. Okay, then the air passes on to the larynx. Okay, up to the larynx we call it an upper respiratory tract. Okay, and then after the larynx, when we move on to the trachea, primary bronchioles, they keep on dividing, secondary, tertiary bronchioles, right? And finally the air reaches into the alveoli or alveolar sac. So that is called as that's, we call it a lower respiratory tract. You might have heard doctors saying that, oh, he has an upper respiratory tract infection. That means the infection is somewhere in the pharynx or in the larynx or in the nasal cavity. Oh, he has a lower respiratory tract infection. That means the infection is somewhere in the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, right? So these are the upper respiratory organs and these are the lower respiratory organs. Yeah. And the air passes, the order of the air entries from nose to pharynx to larynx to trachea to bronchi to bronchioles, and finally to the alveoli. Alveoli is the last one where the exchange will take place. Exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide will take place here. Okay. So you need to know how to categorize between upper respiratory and lower respiratory tract organs. Okay. So these are all organs of your respiratory system. We're going to discuss about them one by one. Okay. But before that, the passageways through which the air passes and reaches to the alveoli, like this is the alveoli, alveolar sacs. Okay, the finally air reaches in the alveoli sacs. Okay, and they're surrounded by the blood vessels. Okay, so there we have a respiratory membrane through which the oxygen is diffused in and carbon dioxide is diffused out. Then the air which we breathe in, okay, that air needs to be purified, humidified, and warmed. So why do you think humidifying, warming, or filtering air is important. Why do we need to do that? And we know that nose plays a very important role in humidifying, warming, and filtering the air. But why do we need to do all these three things? To match the temperature of the body. Okay, very good, Huda. Any other person? Get rid of bacteria? Absolutely. To be, yes. See, what is humidifying? Humidifying is, for example, if we stay in a desert area, the air is very dry over here, as air that comes isn't clean. Absolutely. To be same as the blood. Absolutely. Very good, all of you. So, what is humidifying? To protect our body from bacteria? And yes, Noora, absolutely. Prevent dryness in the lungs. Absolutely, running. Definitely. See, let's say, for example, we take the air. I'm living in a desert, okay, and the air, I know that the air is very dry over here. Or maybe I live, maybe in Antarctica, where the air is very cold and dry. Cold air is also very dry. Okay, so if I inhale dry air, okay, it's going to harm my these alveolar sacs, which are so very thin, balloon-like organs, right? They might be damaged, they might be destroyed, which I don't want absolutely, right? So now the question is, how is this air going to be humidified? As I'm inhaling the air, okay, I know that within the nose, okay, we have a mucous membrane. Okay, and do you remember which membrane lines the respiratory organs? Chapter number 3. Last semester we spoke about it. Name the epithelial tissue which lines the respiratory organs. No, I asked the question about, you're right, it's mucus. But which epithelial tissue is it? With the cilia, very good. It's not squamous columnar. No. It's pseudostratified yes, absolutely, pseudostratified epithelia. We spoke about it last semester. Pseudostratified with the goblet cells in between, it looks something like this, right? So it has a goblet cell in between, and the goblet cell produces the mucus, right? So when the air is taken in by the nose, okay, so what we have in the nose, we have the mucous membrane, and it is this mucous membrane which has goblet cells, and it's going to produce the mucus. So the moisture which is added to the air is basically brought from the, or added from the mucus present in the respiratory passageways, especially in the nose. Then warming the air. In the nose, okay, superficially, we have plenty of blood capillaries present. Small, small blood capillaries are present, right? And these blood capillaries are so very superficial, they're very close to the skin, right? And blood has a particular temperature, right? It's maintained, it has its own temperature, right? So what happens, 37 degree. So when we inhale air in, so the heat of the blood, okay, is given, is exchanged between the air which I inhaled through my nose. So warming of the air is done by the blood capillaries which are very close to the nose. That helps in warming the air. Okay, and as I told you that blood capillaries are so very close near the nose. Okay, and you might have seen that there are some people, if God forbid, if you hit them, okay, or your small brother and sister, if you hit them, right, the nose might bleed, the epistaxis, right? So it bleeds because, as I said, that there are lots of capillary plexus of capillaries very close to the, and very superficial, okay, in the membrane of the nose. Okay, so warming is done by the blood, humidifying is done by the mucus, And now filtering, of course. Filtering is, first of all, we have nasal hairs. They help in filtering of the air. Then we have something called as, the first line of defense mechanism. We have mucin present in the mucus, or we have lysozyme, okay, which act as a first line of defense. They try to kill the microorganisms, as microorganisms are trapped in the mucus, isn't it? And then that air, which has been humidified, warmed, and filtered, will be sent to the lungs for the exchange, right? So nose is the only external organ, okay, which is, which you can, external respiratory organ, which is visible from outside, and air enters through the nostrils. And then we have a nasal septum in the nose. If you remember last semester, we spoke about this. This is the nasal septum. Does anyone remember from last semester? This nasal septum is made up of which two bones make the nasal septum? Yes. Mucous membrane is never dry. It's a wet membrane. Last semester we spoke about it, right? Rava. Is it Rava? No, it's Huda. Huda, we spoke about it. The mucous membrane is a wet membrane, right? It keeps on secreting the mucus. It's a warmer and the, no, it's not the sphenoid. If you remember, I told you anteriorly at the top, this is the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone. So the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, okay, this one, this orange one, superiorly, and inferiorly the facial bone called as a vomer, the single facial bone in the face other than the mandible. Okay, so this was something, we spoke about that last semester. So vomer and the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone makes up the nasal septum. Okay, now we already spoke about all these in the role of the nose. Okay, and the mucus has lysozyme, right? Now, and we also have cilia in the nose. Okay, uh, in the mucus of the nose, because it's a ciliated pseudostratified epithelia. Okay, so this cilia will move the contaminated mucus towards the throat. In the throat, either you can bring it outside as a cough, or you can swallow it in the stomach, then which will be later on expelled out. Okay, so these are the two options which could be done, if you have a lot of mucus present in the throat. And then we have, if you remember last semester also, we spoke about the conches. I don't know whether you remember it or not. We spoke about nasal conches, right? If you remember, let me show you the diagram. Remember, we had this is a middle nasal conche. This is the inferior nasal conche. This is a middle nasal conche. And then we have two over here, right? If you remember, I told you inferior nasal conche is itself a facial bone, right? That combined facial bones, two facial bones, and rest of them belongs to the ethmoid bone, the superior and the middle nasal conche. And if you remember, I told you that they act as shelves over here. Look at this. They act as shelves over here. Okay. So when we inhale the air through nose, okay. So what is the function of conche? If you remember, I told you that conches, they increase the surface area in the nose. As it increases the surface area, so air will get maximum time to spend through these through these nasal conches, through these shelves, and then air is being sent through the first pharynx, then larynx, and then the trachea. And then we also have a a palate over here. If you see here, this is a palate, right? The hard palate present in the front side, right? That hard palate separates, okay, the nasal cavity from the oral cavity or the mouth cavity. So your oral cavity and the nasal cavity, they are separated from each other by the hard palate. Does anyone remember which bones form the hard palate from last year's chapter? Yes, ladies. Does anyone remember which bones form the hard palate? I'll show you the diagrams. Maxilla. Yes, Shata, absolutely. It's the, this is the maxilla, right? The palatine process of the maxilla. This and this. And the palatine bone, two palatine bones, which is a facial bone. So they together, all of them form the hard palate over here. Okay. And then we also have a soft palate behind that. So palate will separate the superior, the nasal cavity from the oral cavity, from the mouth. Okay. And then the next thing which we're going to talk about are this, the sinuses. We discussed that in previous chapter also, the same diagram, paranasal sinuses. We have four different types of sinuses present in the face. Okay, the largest one being the maxillary. Okay, and then you have frontal, then we have the sphenoid and the ethmoid, or right over here behind the eyes. Okay, and if you remember, this is the same slide from last year. We discussed that they lighten the skull. When we talk, when we sing, they act as a resonance chamber, or they produce a mucus, okay, giving us protection in the respiratory system, okay. And then finally, when a lot of mucus is there, right, so that mucus, drains through the nasal cavity over here. Is it clear to everyone? And even the nasal, if you remember, we discussed about the lacrima. Lacrima means tears, right? Nasolacrimal, the nasal lacrimal duct. Okay, it's the duct which connects. If you remember, we spoke about lacrimal fossa over here. Okay, so excessive tears go to the nasolacrimal duct and empty into the nasal cavity. We discussed this is the same thing. Okay, then we have the pharynx. What is the common name of pharynx? Pharynx is called as the throat. Oh, she has a pharyngeal infection. That means she has a throat infection. Okay, and the pharynx is basically this area from here to here. This is pharynx, which is made up of skeletal muscles. And then once it goes beyond further, the pharynx is the one which opens up into esophagus, and then esophagus enters the stomach. Okay, so remember, the the uh, the pharynx is a common passageway. When I say common passageway, what does that mean? That means air can also enter and pass through the pharynx. Even whatever you eat, that also pass through the pharynx. Is it clear to everyone? So it's a common passageway not only for food but for the air as well. And this pharynx is divided into three parts: the nasopharyngeal part, the oropharyngeal part, and the laryngopharyngeal part. Let's try to know where they're present. The nasopharyngeal part is present just behind the nose, somewhere right over here. Okay, and then we have the oropharyngeal, which is just behind the mouth. Let me erase this. Just behind the mouth, this blue colored is the oropharynx or oropharyngeal part. And then just behind the larynx, this is the larynx, the voice box. Just behind it, this part is called as the laryngopharynx. If I ask you a question, do you think the food passes through all the three parts of the pharynx, the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx? when we eat or swallow the food? Of course not. The part where food does not enter is the nasopharynx, as itself says naso, right? We don't eat from nose. So air passes through the nose and then conchi and then reaches the nasopharynx, right? Where further it meets the other parts of the pharynx. So nasopharynx only air passes through it, right? While as the oropharynx and laryngopharynx is basically both for food as well as for water. What else we have in the pharynx? Okay, we also have the tonsils. Okay, so look at these tonsils. Look at this. These are the pharyngeal tonsils, right? And these are the palatine tonsils, lingual tonsil. This is the tongue. Okay. So other than that, the tonsils, if you remember, we spoke about them. They are the lymphoid follicles, which protects our what respiratory system. Okay. And then we also spoke about that they're the part of the mold mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. Your skin is a part of malt, MALT. We discussed that previously in the previous semester. Okay, and then we also have some pharyngotyphanic tubes cover of, these are the tubes which open into the nasopharynx. So sometimes in small children they get infection. Okay, so infection might spread to the air through the pharyngotyphanic tubes because they're connected to each other, the air and the nasopharynx. Okay, this is about the tonsils, which we already spoke about, the three types of tonsils. Now larynx. Yeah, only air passes through nasopharynx. Yes, Maisa. Now, what do you think? What is the difference between larynx and pharynx? Anyone? You switch on your mic. What is the difference between the pharynx and the larynx? Whatever you know about it. No need to tell me anything in detail. Just tell me the basic thing. What is the difference between nasopharynx and the laryngopharynx? I mean the what the difference between the larynx and the pharynx? What do you think? Nobody? Okay, for as I said, that pharynx is the throat, right? Pharynx is this part. For example, as the air goes through here or food goes through here, right? It passes through pharynx here. Okay. And then what happens after that? The main function of larynx is, for example, it has to distribute, to reroute. Air has to go into the larynx, while as food has to continuously go into the esophagus. Larynx is the sound box. No, larynx is not the lower throat. Larynx is where we produce the sound. This is the larynx, the blue thing which you see here. Pharynx is the throat. Pharynx is the throat. Yeah. So both food and air passes through pharynx, but only air passes through the larynx. So through the larynx, only air is allowed to pass, because in a while we're going to talk about the epiglottis. This specialized, cartilaginous structure which covers the larynx, okay, when we eat something, so that the food particles which we eat, they do not enter into the larynx. Not even a single particle of food should be allowed to go from the pharynx into the larynx, because larynx is meant for only and only for the air, right? So food does not go into larynx. Yes, it's not, it separates. There is basically a cartilage which, which covers the larynx. Let me erase this. if you see here, this is an epiglottis, a cartilage, okay, which will cover the larynx like this, which is going to cover the, wait a minute, let me erase this, okay, use another color pen, give me a minute. Okay, I'm just trying to take another color pen. Look at this. This is the area which will be covered by the, closed by the epiglottis. Okay, so the food which you're eating, so the food which you ate from the mouth, this is the tongue over here. Okay, as you swallow the food, this is covered now. Okay, so food will straight away go to the esophagus, because the extension of pharynx is the esophagus. So food passes from pharynx straight away to the esophagus. It is something like, the front part, the anterior part is basically the larynx, and then we have the trachea here. Larynx, and then trachea over here. While as the back part we have, it is the esophagus, this back part. Did you all understand till now? So it's very, very important that, you might have seen that sometimes not only good table manners, but yes, in our religion also, it said that we should not talk while we are eating. This is the reason why we should not talk, because this thing is very, very important. We should not send a single particle of food into the larynx or trachea, because it will go deep down to the lungs, and that can be a source of infection in the lungs. We don't want that to happen, right? So that is why epiglottis plays a very, very important role. Okay, this is a, it's a cartilaginous thing. Okay, does anyone know what kind of cartilage makes this epiglottis, the structure which you see over here? Is it a hyaline elastic cartilage? Absolutely. I think we spoke about it in last semester. It's an elastic cartilage which is covered by the mucous membrane. This is not just the cartilage, it's covered by the mucous membrane. And then, right, it seals the trachea, it seals the trachea, so that no food particles allowed to enter into the pharynx, sorry, into the larynx, or then into the trachea, or then into the lungs. Okay, so larynx, common, we call it a voice box. It is the only air path. No food passes to the larynx. So routes air and food into proper channels. Plays a role in the speech. That is what's called as a sound box or a voice box. Larynx has a very, very important role to play in the, in producing the sound, because you will see that it is made up of 9 cartilages. This structure is not from your book, so you don't have to know it. Okay, so I've just brought in here to show you how larynx looks like. Look at it, it's mostly cartilaginous, because in the larynx we have 9 cartilages. It's made up of 9 cartilages. Out of 9, you have 3 cartilages which are paired, that makes up 6, and 3 which are unpaired. Okay, so if you see here, this is the largest cartilage, this is a thyroid cartilage, this is the unpaired cartilage. You can feel this cartilage from outside because it's covering the sound box. The Adam's apple, might have heard about Adam's apple. So it's the thyroid cartilage, right, covering the important parts in the larynx. Okay, and then this cricoid cartilage, a small ring-shaped cartilage, it is also a single cartilage. You don't have to know the names, you just need to know the name of the epiglottis and what is it made up of, what is its function. Okay, and the third is the epiglottis, this one. These 3 are considered as the cartilages of the section 3, no, what was I saying? So this is these are the, no, 9 cartilages. Okay, overall 9 cartilages are there. Out of 9 cartilages, we have 3 cartilages which are paired, okay, and the three which are unpaired. So no need to know the names. As I said, that you just need to know the names of the name of the epiglottis, which is made up of, which is an elastic cartilage. And the rest of the cartilage, the rest eight of the cartilage are all hyaline cartilages. No need to know the names. Okay. And then you just need to know that only this is the largest cartilage called as a thyroid cartilage, right? Which protects your sound box. Okay. So inside the sound box, okay, we have something called as a glottis. Okay, so we already spoke about what is the function of the epiglottis. We already spoke about that, right? It seals off the windpipe, right? So that the food which we eat does not enter into the trachea. Okay, so the food goes directly into the esophagus. But what is the difference? Have you ever heard about the word glottis? You know what is the difference between glottis and the epiglottis? Difference between glottis and epiglottis. Anyone? Yes, ladies, have you ever heard the word glottis?
It underneath the epiglottis and it's responsible for making sound.
Yes. See, epiglottis is there. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Epiglottis is something which has nothing to do with the sound. This is something which confuses students. Epiglottis is just this cartilage, right, which covers the trachea. This cartilage which covers the larynx, right? It has nothing to do with the sound. Nothing to do with the sound. However, just behind this, just behind the thyroid cartilage, we have a membrane. It's something. Let me show you the diagram. I don't have a diagram for that. Let me make it over here. We have something like a paired membrane, which is a paired mucous membrane. Okay. Okay, we call them as vocal cords. So we have vocal cords here, and in between the vocal cord there's a slit, there's an opening in the middle. Okay, so this whole thing is called as a glottis. So a pair of vocal cords, which is nothing but made up of a mucous membrane, and then the opening here, this opening here, together it's called the glottis. So glottis is something which is responsible for sound production, because as the air is basically comes in contact with these, with these vocal cords. Okay, so these vocal cords vibrate. As they vibrate, sound is produced. Okay, so did you understand the difference between glottis and the epiglottis? Epiglottis is to cover the trachea or to cover the larynx, while as glottis is something which produces the sound. It has something to do with the sound production, because the main function of larynx is voice production. The main function of larynx is to produce the voice. Okay, and then the secondary function of it is to route the air and food into proper channels. Food goes into the esophagus, and the air into the trachea. Did you all understand? And these vocal cords, you might have heard that males have, they have a little deeper voice than the females, because males produce a lot of testosterone. And because of that testosterone, these vocal cords are a little longer and thicker. And especially they become more longer and thicker in puberty, when males start producing a lot of testosterone. Okay, so that's why males have deeper voice. Okay, because they have longer and thicker vocal cords than the females. Okay, so so epiglottis is called as the guardian of the airways. Guardian because it's guarding the airways. It's protecting the airways. Okay, while as glottis is something which has something to do with the sound production. Okay, so that is why I want all of you to be very, very sure with this. The role of epiglottis is in swallowing, ensuring that food goes down into the esophagus, while as the role of glottis and the vocal cord is in the sound production. We stop over here, and the next topic which we'll discuss on Thursday would be the trachea. That's all for today. Any questions about the anatomy of these respiratory organs? No questions? Okay, then. Okay, have a wonderful day ahead. Bye bye, everyone. Uh, yes, I will be, yeah, in biochemistry, everyone will use a 9 a.m. link. Yes, because I will start with the 9 a.m. link, and even the 10:30 a.m. people will use the 9 a.m. link. Yes, absolutely. Please send me an email, Haifa. Yeah, please send me an email. And I need to check, when you joined that, because I will be able to check that out once I enter the attendance over the weekend. Okay, in the Moodle for those people who have joined late. So please send me an email. Okay, bye bye everyone.